In the 2020s, the use of remote work escalated dramatically with the COVID-19 pandemic as people stayed home to work. This trend grew to a large portion of the white collar workforce, with a significant portion working out of the office. While this does work for varied industries across the country, is remote working something that would be feasible or good for an emergency communications center? This is Lifeline. Thank you all for joining us today. We appreciate you tuning in and tuning in. What is this, the 1970s? And listening to our podcast. So, Erica, the whole trend of remote work, where you're at home, not having to, put on a tie and a shirt and, pants, go into an office, is very appealing to a lot of people because, in their mind, they're like, oh, it's basically, I don't have to, get up early to take a shower. I can just, go to my computer.
Yeah.
How feasible does that look? Because you recently had your CMCP class, and you guys kind of talked about that a little bit, right?
Yes. And so I don't remember exactly how we landed on the subject, but we were, I think, in the looking at different ways to, it was, we got on the subject of technology and video. That's how it came up, because now that we're on the cusp of probably even our center going to the technology where, we can send a link to a person's phone and voila, now we're in the emergency with them. And now we have eyes and ears. So in that
And shared
conversation,
trauma.
and shared trauma, no kidding. And so as we were talking about that, I think the instructor just kind of mentioned, oh, and by the way, there's also been remote work. And of course, this is a Texas based class.
Mm-hmm.
And we all collectively went, I'm sorry, what? Excuse me, what? Because none of us, to my recollection, knew that it was a thing.
Mm-hmm.
To us, it was a
Yeah.
completely foreign concept. Because I don't know about you, but how many times have I been at the grocery store or anywhere and, or just visiting with someone over the course of conversation, they ask, what do I do? I tell them what I do. They say, oh, are you hiring? I say, of course, we're always hiring. And they say, can you work from home? And I'm like, please, no. And what kind of silly
No.
question is that? Duh,
Mm-hmm.
not so silly anymore. And I Googled and I was taken aback. It's not a foreign
They had
concept anymore.
Wow. That's like shocking because, as you said, we're
Hmm.
in our state of Texas. That's just not done, not even thought about. Just there's so many obstacles to that. But
Or are
other
there?
states, well, yeah, I mean, the technological obstacles, I suppose, have been pretty much hashed away because now you have, instead of a hard line, you've got VoIP, voice over
Hmm.
internet protocol services. So
Yes,
it's,
yes.
if you have internet, you can pretty much talk to anybody in the world, and any call in the world can be routed to you. It's
Yeah.
just setting that up.
And actually, now that you say voice over IP, and we were looking at the way 911 calls are routed, because that's I guess, one of the subject matter expert areas that you would need
Hmm.
to be if you were going for like your emergency number professional certification. So we were talking about all of this, and this is all rolled into that big ball of wax, how 911 calls are routed. And so we got on the subject of everything going over the internet now. And with that being one of our big problems with voice over IP calls, is you never know where the person is calling from.
Yeah.
Whereas landlines are our favorite, right? Because pick it up and I know exactly where you are. No if, no ands, no buts. Cell phones, not as rock solid as that, but not as
Hmm.
awful as it used to be anymore.
Yeah.
Then you
And
enter voice over IP.
Yeah, and so for listeners that aren't aware, so your voice over internet protocol is basically you tell your provider, this is my address. So if I have to call like 911, this is the automatic number information, automatic location information, any alley data I want sent to the 911 center.
Yes.
But you, as the client who has VoIP services, can set that address to anything you want. So you've got, you know, a lot of swatting calls that happen because of
Yes.
this,
Yes.
because you could fake someone's address.
Yes.
And, you know, for anyone interested in doing that, that is a crime. So
Please
please don't
don't.
do that.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's also dangerous.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a whole different concept than those of us who are like, oh, I've got my landline, I've got my telephone. Um, you know, so it's a completely different world. Sorry, I just didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, no, no. That's good because, and another thing that messed me up, which is probably going to have to be another show, is we learned that in the not too distant future, landlines are being phased out,
That
which
that to me is kind of scary in a lot of
I don't
ways.
even know what to do with that information. And my head is like spinning just thinking about
Yeah,
that. So,
because
yeah,
landlines will still work if you don't have electricity, unlike cell
yes,
phones and VoIP services,
yes.
unless you have a Landsat phone.
And because they're supposedly based on the conversation that we were having in this CMCP class, they are more expensive to maintain than the companies are finding them practical to continue to
Mm-hmm.
do. So that's kind of how that conversation. So the the idea or the notion of taking 911 calls from anywhere outside of an actual secured, locked down, fortified, hurricane and tornado withstanding type building with, all the things that we're accustomed to, that just blows my mind. So
Mm-hmm.
the question in my head has always been not can we do it? It's should we do it?
Right. Yeah. Do the benefits outweigh the risks?
And in my mind, the risks are security. Not so much for the person, because your home is your home and you take whatever steps you need to take to secure your home, but the information that we are responsible for and privy to. My mind
Mm-hmm.
immediately thinks sieges, but evidently that has been overcome. Because again, if you Google, you will find on Indeed, for one, there are literal 911 remote jobs. And they're not talking about some other weird 911 number. No, they're talking about the number
Mm-hmm.
that people call and get us.
Yeah. Yeah. Because so Siege is concerned. The basically the criminal justice database, is a very real concern because I believe you get into like felony level stuff, federal
Hmm.
felony level stuff if you're messing with that.
Misusing
So
it.
yeah, so I suppose if you have a room in your house that you can secure and assure that nobody non-CGIS credential can get in there, um, that would overcome that. I still find that a little bit, to me, very nerve-wracking because if you had, say, a nefarious actor
Hmm.
that wanted to get um, not like top secret government stuff, but stuff that the general public does not have access to, it'd be
Yes.
pretty easy to find somebody who is a 911 operator, break into their house and access their system.
And people that we know, and I mean, we're probably going to go down a couple of rabbit holes with this, but I think it's all relevant. I think it's all, it makes sense to ask these questions because we had an episode called, I think it was Always on Duty,
Mm-hmm.
where we talked about us being held to a higher standard, but in that same episode, we talked about relationships and the kinds of relationships we are encouraged to have and the kind that we are not encouraged to have. And I'm actually going somewhere here. Say you are dating so and so, brother such and such, and we'll just call him brother such and such, and he is not exactly a law-abiding citizen. Whereas you go to work and your work is in a secured location, the CGIS information that you have access to, you would have to take that from that secured location and then hand it over to someone, right? But in a relationship where that person has access to your home, where this equipment is supposed to be stored as you are doing this work from your home that we can't really monitor, who
Hmm.
is to say who has access to it, and how would you safeguard it in someone's private residence?
Yeah,
How far
and
can you go with that?
yeah, and not to mention, like maybe a nefarious significant other, but like, if like my father was also in emergency communications, and if there was a super secret room in the house that had super special communications equipment in it that I was not permitted in, I cannot tell you how much as a kid I would be like, I have to get into that room.
Absolutely.
That, yeah, I mean, probably wouldn't have
There's
done
a
that.
there's a name for that. What do they call it? Attractive nuisance, I think,
Mm,
is where, and it may be, I think it's relevant here because it would be take a child or teenager, right? You say don't
hmm
do it, and then you put
and
deadbolts and locks and alarms and a big red doorknob that says do not touch it.
you got to touch it.
You
I
got
mean, you have to.
you.
There's no choice there. Yeah.
Yeah.
And what kind of point of contention would that be with your family?
Yeah.
Because, you know, sorry, honey, I've got to go to my secret room. You can't know about anything that happens in here, and I'm not going to talk about it. So, uh, I don't know how well that would work out in most
Well,
relationships.
Well, let me just say, for those of you who will be listening to this on any other type of podcast place, you can't see my sister face right now. And the sister face is, okay, exactly who you talking to? Jake from
Mm,
From State Farm. That face. You know that commercial where the lady is like, who you talking to? She snatches the phone.
hmm
That situation. Yeah.
hmm
I
Yeah.
don't know. I kind of went off, but
Yeah.
you know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I get you. That would. Um, so not only do you have sort of the security concerns of just piping in information that is
Mm.
class not classified but is secured,
Well,
CGIS
yeah.
information, but you've also got sort of the issue of dealing with like how that affects your relationships at home.
Yeah.
Not to mention, you were saying before the show that these places that let you work from home, they stick a camera on you. So
Yes.
just like at I don't want to say a real center, but at a center where people go in to work, an in-person center,
Mm-hmm.
you've got to ask permission to get up. You've got to ask, to do X and Y and Z, and how that
Mm-hmm.
affects you as well.
And I'm just thinking, we spent a lot of time talking about what it is like for us to separate the types of calls and the trauma that we experience every day at work, and how important it is for us to draw a line between what we do and our home. And I don't know about you, but I think I can say that I believe I know you well enough that your home is your sanctuary. You go there and it is the place where nothing 911 happens. Now, that's the same for me. I don't know that I would want to bring that home with me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like those calls and the trauma, like to like like you and I are, I think, very old school, where it's like we separate our mind, like I'm at work me and then I'm not at
Yes,
work me.
yes.
And to have you know a room in my house where it's like I've got to ask permission to get up to go to the bathroom or take a break, and then I'm also hearing all of these calls and all this trauma, like it would taint the house, it would
Where do
mess
you
with the
go?
feng shui.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, where do you go to get away from work? We
Mm-hmm.
tell people all the time, as much as is reasonable and possible, leave work at work.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to, I don't know about other people, but I think for me, I'm married, right? So I have a work persona. I am a supervisor at work, and so I have to carry myself a certain way. I have a certain mindset when I walk in the door. I my thought processes are a certain way because I am at work. I am in my communications supervisor emergency mode. That is how I think. When I
Hmm.
leave that building, get in my car and leave those gates, I morph into a different person. Not a complete stranger, right? It's not Dr.
Yeah.
Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, but I am a different person. I allow certain facets of my personality to come to the forefront when I leave there. And I just don't know how healthy that is if you are if you're not able to do that. I don't know how I feel about that.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and like kind of, it's almost acts like a sort of a shield of armor too. That
Mm-hmm.
persona. I mean, Chief Ramirez from the Mind Base episode may not agree. Uh, in terms of like putting up that defensive shell,
Mm-hmm.
but to me, that's one of the ways that I can kind of like in my mind be like, I am acting in a professional role here, so
Yes.
I need to, no matter what happens, you know, be professional, and
Yeah.
it helps to mitigate the the heartache that
Mm-hmm.
you know I would otherwise feel, being like, oh, this 3-year-old just burned to death in a fire. That's kind of sad, but when you're at work, you've got to, it's like that is sad, but now I've got to attend to this call taker who's crying.
Yes.
I got to get
Yes.
another radio channel open. I don't
Mm-hmm.
have time to wallow in that.
Yeah, and it's funny that you brought up that whole shield thing. So at this same we were at the backup center and I went into the kitchen area, and at the backup center we have cadet classes that happen. And there was this he was a cadet, but it sounded like, if I'm remembering right, he at one point was a police officer, left the profession, is now back. And we got to chatting as I'm waiting for my popcorn to pop. And he says to me, we visited for a few minutes, but at some point he said something like, look at you, you would never know that this is what you do for a living, right? As a supervisor and 911 operator, because I was visiting with him and telling him how when I'm talking to you face to face, I sound one way, but then when I go to key up on the radio, I sound another way. And I'm actually going somewhere with this. And so he was telling me how he gets that because for him, as he's getting ready to go to work, he puts on his shoes, he puts on his shirt, his pants, and as he compiles his rate his I don't know, compiles right, as he's putting on his uniform, he's
Hmm.
stepping into that persona, and it changes him so that when he walks out the door, he is no longer the husband and father that he was on the other side of that threshold, because he
Hmm.
gets to leave his home and he leaves that persona at home and he goes out into the world and has to be, this police officer with this certain presence that you have to deal with the things that they have to deal with.
Oh yeah,
Same
yeah.
in the same principle, I think is true here because we bring our trauma home with us. We carry it with us. There's no such animal as being able to just take it off. Can you imagine bringing it home with you? Matter of fact, not
Y-
only you bringing it home with you, it doesn't ever leave because it's in the other room.
It's delivery. It's not trauma. It's DiGiorno. But yeah,
Okay, Gary.
we are not sponsored by DiGiorno.
No.
But but yeah, like there's no. Um, I mean, you might. I don't know. It seems weird to like have like this is my trauma room in the house in your house. Like that seems like bad. That's like
Panic
50 Shades of Grey kind
room.
of thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, no kidding. I
Um,
I don't know. But like we said before the show started, like in this class we were talking about it and the instructor brought up, so you have this, huge event in your city and you're holding 150 calls and then it just is not stopping and you don't see a light at the end of the tunnel. If you had a remote workforce that is CGIS compliant and they have the equipment, they have all the things, they have the skill set. how nice would it be to be able to send out your version of an all call or an all page or whatever that looks like, or mass text message, mass email, and say, hey, I need 5 people to respond to this message, to log on and help us out through this backlog, and somebody work on the abandoned queue. You guys log in, you do the abandoned queue, you make callbacks, you do whatever that is. And as a supervisor, you have a workforce of anywhere from 5 to 15 people at your fingertips that you can access like that.
And really, like even more so than that, like we were discussing the TERT program earlier, the
Yeah.
emergency response program. If you've got a hurricane in Houston that's causing all sorts of issues, you really don't want to send more people to that area to suck up resources.
Yeah.
If somebody in El Paso or Boulder, Colorado,
Yeah.
Eugene, Oregon, anywhere
Mm-hmm.
could just
Mm-hmm.
log in and start working on that. It really kind of breaks down the need to have a workforce living in the area.
Yeah. It would be, I mean, there would be some challenges to it, but like I admitted completely before we came on the air, I was completely biased against the idea. I just
Hmm.
was, because it was foreign to me. I couldn't see the forest for the trees. I couldn't see the value of it. But even as we're talking about it right now, I still have my reservations about whether it's a good idea for the person, the human being that has to process those calls and not have that clear line between home and work. But I can
Hmm.
see the value as a 911 supervisor, that if I had 5 or 6 people, I could snap my fingers and say, "Hey, I need 5 people to log in right now because we got problems," and
Yeah.
have it be a thing that can happen. And at the end of that, I say, "You want time or money?" And it's done.
Hmm. Because really, like, you could, like, really take that as far as you wanted. So, do you even need any 911 centers? Because if you could just have people working remotely, it
Mm,
doesn't matter. Like, I guess you need to know, like, have the jurisdiction questions lined up the same. But
sure.
like if you're in the same state, you should be able to be a telecommunicator anywhere in that state with your license.
Telling you.
So,
That's where it could get sticky, I think, because you would be licensed to work in whatever, because like TCOL is a thing, and
hmm,
it's stringent. It's kind of strict compared to a lot of states. Certain things you just can't do here that you
yeah,
can do other places. Certain convictions you can have other places that
hmm,
will never fly here, and I don't care how long ago it's been. So I think that, like you said, jurisdictional lines and license requirements and things like that, you would have to work out. But the benefits, I have to wonder now, as we're having this conversation, do they outweigh my reservations?
mm. No, I mean, like, I think that's we've seen that kind of the effects of that with like all sorts of things in life, like just at scale industries. So you've got one like call center for like Visa, and like
Hmm.
they have like 800 people working there, and they handle the whole world's Visa calls, and you don't know where they're at.
Right.
And is because to me, like, I don't feel like not being able to call like your local mom and pop hardware store. Like, I have a problem with this hammer, as opposed to having to call like the Home Depot corporate line and
Yeah.
answer it anywhere. Like, you get a different level of service. It's
Agreed.
more expensive to have it local. It's not as efficient, true, but you know, who wants to go through a like a phone decision tree? Press one if you're being stabbed, and like I could see like, not not
I know
necessarily
what you
what we're talking
mean.
about here, but
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
like it getting to that point. So because emergency services are a little bit different because you don't operate them efficiently. You don't want emergencies to operate at efficiency because you want them to be able to have the elasticity to handle
Hmm.
catastrophes when they happen. So you
Yes.
want them
Yes.
to be able to absorb that. So
I
it's
agree.
different than like calling your cable company.
Sure.
So, and like moving it to a more remote workplace, I think is kind of a step away from the more, I don't know, local feel of it. Because, if like in our city we have a road called Ptarmigan, um,
Yeah,
and if you don't know that word, you are never going to spell that correctly.
you will not.
We've got a
You'll,
road called Burnett. You're
yeah,
probably not going to spell that correctly.
right.
So there are
You're not going to spell that ptarmigan with a P.
no, no.
And if you
Um,
had to say it, you're going to say ptarmigan.
hmm Yeah, and I mean, there of course there's technologies that can overcome that with like, you know, searching on maps and that kind of thing, and sound exits. But there's so many things that you miss by removing the local from it. I guess I'm kind of
And
off topic here, but
well, yeah, yes and no, because here's something else with working remotely, even in a 911 environment, because there is a such thing as dispatching remotely too, which just messes with
hmm
my whole. I was messed up before, and now I'm sorry. What? Think about it in terms of, we have sectors, and our in our center, the sectors are situated so that they can talk to each other without having a lot of real estate in between them. So let's just say Baker and Charlie are not far from each other. Matter of fact, they can look across at each other, stretch
and
out
yell at
their
each other.
arms, and they can touch, right?
hmm
Now, if you had that remote, now what does that do for these two to be able to talk to each
hmm
other in the event of an emergency that requires them to coordinate?
Yeah,
We have South by
yeah,
Southwest coming up. What happens, God forbid, if the pod system that we use, so that all those radios and specialty channels and sub channels and all the things, imagine if they were spread out and two or three of them are in their house.
hmm
Would we
yeah,
say you could do that? You could dispatch remotely except for during South by or except for during ACL?
hmm yeah. What are the limits you're putting on that? I mean, because it does offer a lot of opportunity. Like to me, like especially things like like the disaster when those
Hmm.
happen, you don't have to worry about having people drive out or fly out to the disaster scene. They could do it, from their house, or from maybe there's a special room in the comm center where they could hook into the matrix.
It
But
just, you can go so many different directions and there's so many what ifs. And I think what it boils down to is it worth, is the trouble of it or our reservations worth the good it could potentially do?
hmm yeah, because I think there are questions about what that does to not only the employee in terms of like
Hmm.
their home life, but um, the I don't know, just the quality of service. Because I don't think anybody would say that they get better phone service or customer service now than they did 40 years ago when it was more local. I mean, maybe. I mean,
Hmm.
Amazon's pretty good, but you know,
It's a
like
good question.
yeah. So it's the idea, and if you're coming at it with an idea of efficiency, that's understandable from like a lot of things in the business world, but
Hmm.
in the emergency world, you have to that has to take a backseat to making sure the mission is always accomplished. So
It
kind
really
of kind
depends.
of akin, yeah, kind of akin to like the post office and the military. If the post office doesn't deliver your mail for a day, that might
Not the
suck.
end of the
You might
world.
want something. Yeah. If the military doesn't succeed at its mission, uh-oh.
We got problems and
So,
situations. And you know what?
yeah.
Even as you say that, what about what about the peer-to-peer relationships?
Yeah.
What
There's not
about
going to be
them?
that sense of camaraderie.
And what about peer support? And what about the ability to, as a supervisor, interact with your employee on a day to day to be able to tell when something's not right? Because
Yeah.
we work with these people every day, and not everyone is going to say, "Hey, I'm not okay."
Yeah. I mean,
And
if you
since we
just
don't
like,
have mind base, so
yeah, because if you think about like just somebody some 911 operator working by themselves alone in the middle of Plano or something where there's like 400 people and like they never talk to anybody else and all they do is work. Like that could, very potentially end up in like a lot of suicides.
Yeah. I mean,
Because
and just as a supervisor for one thing, and just our supervisor hats on. How many times, Gary, have you and I seen that look on a
mhm.
relatively new call taker's face, and you're like, okay, and you say, "You okay?" "Yeah, I'm okay." Not so much. And they never do say that they're not okay, but we insert ourselves, right? We say,
Mhm.
let's visit, or we just strike up a conversation and we keep that conversation going until they talk to us. And whether they realize it or not, we're allowing them to unload whatever has been burdening them down. Where they, no, they wouldn't call peer support. No, they wouldn't call the employee assistance program. No, they would not come right out and ask for crisis. But we've been doing this long enough that we know some of the signs and we can intervene before it becomes a problem.
Mhm.
And if they're sequestered somewhere in their home and I can't get to them and I can't read their body language or facial expressions on this little camera that's something like what we're working on right now, that's not enough. So
Yeah.
I I don't know.
It seems really isolating.
Yeah.
I could see it being really isolating for people, and you know, so I mean, I don't know what are y'all's thoughts. I know Erica and I are kind of old dinosaurs here. Well, Erica's 21, but um,
Yes, I started
you
when I was
know,
12.
so we may be kind of have blinders on with this subject, but
Yeah.
I mean, like me personally, I think it could be good and useful in an emergency where you need a lot of call takers or dispatchers on to a place that's got some sort of catastrophe happening. But in terms of like sort of the day to day operations, I think the the juice is not worth the squeeze.
I agree.
The idea is cooked, as the kids would say.
Oh my gosh. I didn't even know that was a thing. I get the juice worth the squeeze thing, but I cooked, I don't know what that means.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Okay.
But but yeah, let us know what you think. Are we way off base or not?
Are we overthinking
But
it or what?
yeah, but yeah, please feel free to shoot us an email at lifeline911podcast@gmail.com. And thank you all so much for joining us. Make sure you like and subscribe. And from all of us at Lifeline 911, I'm Gary,
I'm Erica.
and we will see you next week.
Thank you for watching our production of Lifeline 911. If you have any questions about today's topic or topics you'd like us to cover in the future, please reach out to us at lifeline911podcast@gmail.com. This has been a production of Lifeline 911 Podcast, copyright 2025. From all of us at Lifeline, stay safe out there. And until next time, this is Lifeline 911 signing off.